Welcome back everyone to episode 2 of Helium 10's Learning from L's with Lem. The goal of this show is to share some real stories about some common and not so common missteps that sellers have made on their Amazon journeys and to ultimately learn from those whoops moments. We're going to cover 2 to 3 stories and bring them back to life for you all to hear because mistakes can be our best teachers and they make for really great stories. So let's get started. Our first story of the day comes to us from a seller that I actually ran into and met at Prosper a while ago. And what she had told me was an insane, unusual, and atypical story, but still something that I think you guys could get a lot of value out of. Her 3PL actually sent in the wrong inventory, but because she didn't have anything in writing, she was financially responsible for resolving that problem. So now let's rewind a little bit. What is a 3PL? I know some of you guys know it, but for the rest of those in the audience who don't know what a 3PL is, let me catch you up to speed. So a 3PL is a third-party logistics company that will typically take care of handling all of your products in terms of packaging it, shipping it to Amazon, making sure that everything within that process is done according to Amazon's terms of service, and they'll even store it for you while you're waiting for it to be shipped into Amazon's warehouse. And this can save you a ton of time and back-breaking labor. But every once in a while, mistakes can and do happen, which is what this seller learned the hard way. So her 3PL was supposed to ship in 300 units of product A, but actually sent in 300 units of product B instead under the shipment of product A. So the only options you can really take there and what this seller had to do is you can try to email Amazon to try to get them to relabel the products, but you're gonna have to wait a few weeks until the items are checked in. And even after it's checked in, it's very unlikely that they'll even be able to relabel it for you. It's kind of like a Hail Mary at that point. So at least in this seller's case, removal was her only option. But Amazon isn't as convenient as being able to just remove the 300 that was incorrectly sent in and leave the rest alone. No, when it is checked in, it's going to be put with all the rest of the inventory and essentially mixed. And Amazon doesn't have the ability or the bandwidth to be able to differentiate between what's the right product and what's the wrong product. Now, usually when you're sending in inventory, it will be mixed with your other inventory, which is normal. But because in this case, it was the incorrect inventory and it got mixed with everything else, it changed her removal fees of 300 units from having removal fees of around 600 to 800 units, which are a lot more costly. Not to mention the loss of revenue of having to completely clear out your inventory from your listing, which is like, whew. But unfortunately, in the contract for the seller, like we said earlier, there was no clause of what to do if the 3PL sends in incorrect inventory or who's financially responsible if the 3PL makes a mistake that costs her money. So in the seller's case, at least when she was communicating with the 3PL was at least nice enough, and you can usually communicate with the 3PL to try to come to some understanding that her 3PL was able to pay for the removal fees of the 300 incorrectly labeled units, but not the others. That was essentially what they landed on because even though that 300 was incorrect, it's mixed, but they weren't willing to pay for the others, which was a pretty big bummer. But she at least got partial reimbursement for her removal fees. Now, one of the big questions I asked her is, if you could go back in terms of when you were vetting this 3PL, would you stick with them again? Would you do this process again? And she said ultimately she would stick with them again, but she would have asked the right questions. Say that again louder for the people in the back. Ask the right questions. Ask them, when's the last time they made a mistake for a seller that costed that seller money? How did they rectify the situation? Can you have something in writing in the contract that states that they make a mistake, that they will be responsible for it? Things of that nature. Asking the right questions is really the name of the game here and helps protect you and the 3PL in both ways to make sure that you guys are starting up on the right foot. Now, let's say you have an existing contract already. What do you do then? I would have just approached your 3PL and asked them to include that in writing in the contract that you guys signed and talk about who's going to be responsible if a mistake is made that costs the other party money, right? It's just something to make sure that all parties are protected and that you make sure that you're safe and sane if a mistake happens. You don't have to be super worried about the financial aspect of it. All you got to worry about is just time frame. But I'll take a longer time frame over higher financial responsibility any day of the week. Our second story of the day comes to us from a 7-figure seller based out of California who didn't do a proper inspection of their private label product before it was shipped from the manufacturer and didn't realize until it arrived that most of it was defective, thus causing them to have to lose a ton of money because they struggled to get it back from the supplier. Now, is this usually common practice? No, it's not in terms of a product coming defective. For the most part, you're working with a vetted supplier, which you can learn how to do through Freedom Ticket. You will be in good hands and don't have to worry about defective products. However, it still is, when you're working with a vetted supplier or not, still is best practice to have your inventory be checked by a verified third party, whether it's a product inspector or a quality control inspector, whatever the term that you seem to use is, prior to it shipping to you. There's a number of reasons, right? One of them is that shipping times are so long. Nowadays, it can range between 45 to 90 days. So it's not like when I'm ordering something for my private label products, I'm ordering like 1,000 units. It's not getting here in Amazon Prime Time, right? It's not gonna get here in 2 days and I can just return it if it's not right. No, it's gonna get here in a long time. So in that time when I'm waiting, I'm already setting up the system. I'm already creating my business. I'm already creating a listing. I'm doing everything so that I can be ready for a launch the moment it arrives. And for it to arrive defective, it just prolongs the time frame of that launch period so much. And another reason is because since most of private label sellers will be sourcing overseas, it can be very difficult. Not impossible. I didn't say impossible. Don't quote me on that. But it can be challenging to get your money back from a supplier who has sent you defective products overseas, right? That's a difficult process to go through, especially if you didn't have a proper contract, which you always should, which again, you can learn how to do through Freedom Ticket. If you don't have a verified third party check your inventory before it's sent to you, then you never know what could happen or what suppliers can claim has happened in between the period of when they shipped it to you and you receiving it, right? They might claim that it got defective during the shipping process and that it got damaged then, and thus it's not their fault, right? You're never going to know truly who was the source unless you get it verified and checked by a trusted third party. Ultimately, it's always, always, always important to have boots on the ground wherever you're sourcing from, so that way you can make sure that they can double check the quality of your products before it ships out to you. And I bet you've been asking this whole time. I know you've been asking, who do I talk to? I don't know, like a random quality control or product inspector from China or from Mexico or wherever you're sourcing from. I don't know where I can find them. Bada bing, bada boom, Lem's got you. You can find quality control or product inspectors through your suppliers. You can ask them for recommendations, or if your suppliers are unable to provide you with any hot leads, you can ask our community within our Helium 10 member Facebook group. We got over 64,000 people in that group. Yeah, that's 64 with 3 zeros. That's a lot of people, and odds are one of them knows somebody that can help you or somebody that they actually use and can recommend to you because they've worked with that individual before and that they know that they do business well. So that's one of the biggest things that you can go ahead and do for your business to make sure that you always do, so that way all your bases are covered and that you're good to go from day one.
Okay, slam dunk, easy win in 30 seconds is for the love of God, start using Manage Your Experiments inside of Seller Central. It is a free split testing tool. You can use it to test your title, your main image, or your A+ content. I recommend starting with either main image or A+ content. It's really easy to do. It takes 5 seconds to set up. Maybe not 5 seconds, but 5 minutes to set up. But the thing is, these tests take 4 weeks to run. And so if you start this now, you're not going to get rich quick, but you might get 1 or 2% every test. And then the thing is, your competitors can't catch up. It just takes time to run these. And so you've got like a 5-minute investment of your own time, aside from getting some different creative assets. But yeah, start using that, because if you can pick up like 1 to 2% on these tests every month, and you do that for 6 months, like you're going to be in a drastically better position. And I've talked to every agency owner that I know. I've talked to a lot of big sellers, and very, very few people are using this.
Our final story of the day comes to us from a seller from the UK. Yeah, that's right. UK, United Kingdom, baby. We're going global. Love to see it. And what they went through, I so relate to. This seller from the UK didn't double check the seasonality of their top keywords that they were looking to rank for and does drive their sales. And they didn't check the seasonality of the search volume behind those keywords, which then caused sales to fluctuate way more than they thought and threw off their initial forecasted numbers. Now, I said I relate to this a ton because I remember making the same mistake. Not to say I make like mistakes on the daily. Like, I don't make mistakes more than like your average Amazon seller, but like this one I remember distinctly. Why? Because it was like so easy to avoid. You know, like this was such an easy thing to be mindful of, but I just forgot. Like, hey, we're human, right? You're human. We just forget. This guy forgot from the UK. I forgot. US, UK, we're all human. We all make mistakes, right? But how you get past this, how you can move forward, be better than us, is just to be mindful of it, right? Because you're doing your product research, you're validating your product through financial metrics, right? You're looking at what's the dimensions of the niche that I'm looking at? Like, you're going to be doing product research, you're going to be looking at your competitors, you're going to be looking at what's the dimensions of this product, what like size tier does it qualify under? Based on that size tier, what's the FBA fees that I can expect to see off of those FBA fees? How much of margin does that leave me off of that sale price? What's the revenue of my competitors doing? What's the barrier of entry based off of the average reviews of my top competitors versus their average revenue rates? You know, like there's a whole list of things that you're going to be looking at, of course, when you're doing your product research to validate private label opportunity. But when you're doing keyword research, you're kind of doing a similar thing, but just making sure that the demand is there. You see that the revenue is there. You see that the financials are there. But based on the keywords that you're seeing, is there demand that is trending positively, and is there consistent demand? Because first off, I can just say right off the bat, I would not recommend that you do seasonal products as your first private label product if you haven't done a private label product. Seasonal products are definitely something for an experienced seller who can handle that emotional roller coaster of super high search volume in some months and practically zero in others. So that's why we only recommend you to do something that's consistent, but it's easy to find out if it's consistent if you just go in Magnet, right? So because if you're going in Magnet, you're doing your keyword research validation, you're going to judge it based off its current search volume levels. But this is leaving my mic closed. Just kidding. I'll back away. You don't need to hear my ASMR breathing. But it's just to look historically, right? Look backwards, because history is going to be able to allow you to forecast in the future, right? If the search volume was 300 in July, but 5,000 in December, you can assume that you're going to see a similar type of like flow next year, right? And next year in December, next year in the other months, right? You got to look historically, and that's going to allow you to know if you want to take on that risk of seasonality or not. Because of course you're looking at the sales, you're seeing what they're doing, but looking at the seasonality of keywords is also going to support any seasonality that you see within the sales, right? Because it's easy to judge of like, oh, well, that was around COVID, so maybe they had a tough year, or maybe they ran out of stock, so that's why their sales came out. But looking at the keyword search volume history can be super informative. So that's the biggest thing I want to make sure you guys understand is that don't forget to leave that little pebble out of all the other stones that you left unturned, to leave that little pebble also unturned. And to look at the historical search volume of your core keywords within Magnet. And you can look as far back as 2019. So you got plenty of data to be able to forecast based off of that. And so that you can get an idea of the search volume potential for future seasons and prepare accordingly. Well, that does it for our stories this week. I hope you guys enjoyed that segment. This is our second episode. Please tune in to some of our other episodes. I'd love to see you guys engage with us on YouTube or wherever you're seeing this from. And if you like some of our stories, but you got one that you're like, man, I think Lem would like this one, let us know. I'd love to hear them. You can send your emails to sellerstories@helium10.com. At sellerstories@helium10.com. Send us your stories. Send us your feedback. Send us your ideas. We would love to hear it all. But before you do that, remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. We'll see you next time.